Welcome to another episode of InRange. I'm doing a pistol review today. In fact, I'm doing a double pistol review. Now, you've seen the Hellcat on the channel before, and you've seen some of the Sig P365 on the channel before, but you haven't seen both of them in the same video in the way I'm doing it today on the channel before. So, I have a XL 365 here with the Sig Romeo 0 sight on it, a red dot sight, and I've got the Hellcat with the RMS Shield red dot sight on it. And what I'm going to do is shoot 6 stages of essentially an enlarged backup gun match today, doing it twice. Once with each gun on each stage. So I'm going to show each stage twice. To try and mitigate the idea that I'm going to get a warm-up period, I'm going to start with one gun on one stage and then start with the other gun on the other. So on stage 1, I'll start with the Sig and then go to the Hellcat, and then when I get to stage 2, I'll start with the Hellcat and then go to the Sig, vice versa, etc. Now, these guns are very similar in terms of overall size and capabilities. Let's take a look at them closer. So really, these guns are very similar in my opinion. So with the Hellcat, with the smaller magazine, the flush magazine, you have 11+1. With the extended magazine, you have 13+1. And with the Sig XL, you've got 12+1 and 15+1. So you get a couple extra rounds with the P365XL. So both of them, if you put in the larger magazine, you get a more comfortable grip, kind of making the gun seem more like a full-size pistol in your hand. Like, gives you a little extra there so that your pinky, especially on the Hellcat, isn't dropping off. But really, when you put the flush magazine in, these guns are very similar in size. So if we take there and compare them, now obviously this isn't a scientific analysis, but if we put the Hellcat on top of the P365 XL, you can see that the XL is bigger, smidgen in the front, but overall, minimally so, even with the dot. So these are, in my opinion, size comparable guns. So what I'm going to try to find out today is, really, is there a difference between these on the clock? So does the slightly different size difference or the capacity difference of the 365 make a difference? And are the red dots essentially functionally equal in terms of their, or equivalent in terms of their performance and functionality? And how do I perform? So at the end of this, we should see by my scores, I'm going to assume right now that the scores are going to be almost the same, but we're going to find out. 365 kind of has, as I've played with it, maybe a little nicer trigger, but the Hellcat has its own attributes as well. Okay, everybody show me clear. So the match is over. I've completed all 6 stages with both guns, and I did flip-flop. As I said, I would start with one and then start with the other, depending on which one I started with in the last stage. I did shoot them both with the flush magazines, so I used the smaller capacity magazines on both guns, because I would postulate that that's the way most people are likely to carry them, as they don't print as much, and if you reload you could use the larger capacity magazine, and therefore I had the worst possible grip on both guns through the course of fire. While the Hellcat has a slightly worse grip than the Sig in that regard, the reality is if your pinky finger rests under the magazine, I didn't notice it to make a difference whatsoever, and I had no problem with the grip on either of these guns. On both guns, the red dot worked wonderfully. There was no problem acquiring the dot or using them accurately. And I did have one malfunction with the Hellcat throughout the entire course of fire, in which I had to run the action to chamber a round. Now, throughout this entire match, without the exception of the last stage, I'm using old Tula ammunition, so I wouldn't really put that against the Hellcat. That's just luck of the draw. Once I was all done, I calculated the scores. So this match works a little differently than a lot of matches you might be familiar with. So you can leave targets behind and there's no penalty for that, although I didn't leave any behind. I had more than sufficient capacity in this. And for each neutralized target, you get a total value of 7 points. And the target value is added up, and then the time it took you to get those 7 points is subtracted. So in this regard, the higher score wins. So for example, if you shot the stage in 20 seconds and you had 3 targets and you got 7 points for all of them, and that's 21 points, your score for that stage would be 1 point. After shooting both of these guns extensively now, and at InRange, I do not like to do reviews without having a lot of trigger time on a gun. I will say that you would not go wrong with either of these pistols. Both of them will serve you well. Both of them are absolutely reasonable concealment pistols with reasonably high capacity that are more than sufficiently accurate. In terms of my general gut towards these, I would have to say at this point, while I said previously in a previous video that I would have taken the Hellcat over the standard P365, when you put the P365XL into the picture, both of them with a dot, if you pressured me, I would go with the Sig. There's just something a little better about the trigger, and I find it just a little easier, and I mean a little easier, to be more accurate with this gun than this. The Hellcat has a bit of a snappier, sharper recoil impulse than the P365XL does, but the reality is the difference here is almost without a distinction. These guns are, in my opinion, functionally equivalent. So if you have a Hellcat, it's a great pistol for concealed carry. If you have a P365XL with a red dot, also a great pistol for carry. If you were to ask me to go to the store and buy one today, I'd go with the Sig, but I would not feel bad about having the Hellcat either. I like them both very much. I'm going to see how I placed in the overall match results. I'll pin them here while I'm discussing. I don't have them yet. But hopefully, guys, you enjoyed watching this video. Everything you see here on InRange is funded by Patreon supporters. There are no advertisers, no sponsors, no overlords. Now, to be fair, Springfield sent a whole bunch of these Hellcats out to the world, and this one was sent to InRange. But all the ammunition today, the time to be here, the filming, the editing, and all that, your Patreon dollars. The Sig I actually borrowed, so this is a borrowed gun. That said, there's other costs, of course, to keep a channel like this alive, and I am really thankful to all of you out there in the audience that are keeping InRange alive without any sponsors or overlords. You can find us at patreon.com/InRangeTV, and if you can't do that, totally understand. The most important thing you can do is subscribe to one of my multiple distribution points. You can find them at all at InRange.tv/watch, not just YouTube, and more importantly, share with your friends. Thanks.